Aric and Thyra, Love and Destiny. A reimagining of the Ramayana. Part 1. The Chosen One. In an ancient world where 5 distinct kingdoms govern their realms, mortal, golem, beast, celestial, and demonic, a prophecy shaped the destinies of those bound to it. The kingdoms were divided not only by territory but by their very natures. Each realm held unique powers and governed different aspects of existence, yet all lived in fragile harmony. This balance was shattered when the demon king, cursed with unquenchable ambition, sought to rule over all realms, plunging the world into darkness. The mortal, golem, beast, and celestial kingdoms each bore scars from the demon king's tyranny. His power was unrivaled, stemming from ancient demonic pacts that made him nearly invulnerable. These demonic pacts exist in physical form somewhere in the world, but their locations are seemingly and mysteriously impossible to divine even by the gods themselves. Unable to kill him by normal means, the kingdoms discovered through ancient texts that only the Chosen One could wield the power to destroy him. The Chosen One, they learned, was foretold to be of mortal blood, blessed with a divine soul, and bearing a legendary weapon, a divine bow crafted by the gods themselves. It soon became clear that the mortal king's first son, Prince Aric, was this Chosen One. The prince's birth aligned with celestial signs foretold in golem and celestial scriptures, confirming him as the prophetic warrior destined to end the demon king's reign. Part 2. A Stronger Alliance. In the days when the kingdoms of the world were divided yet interdependent, the mortal kingdom and the golem kingdom found themselves at odds. Though they shared a long border and often fought together against threats from the demonic lands, there was tension between their peoples. The mortal kingdom, known for its intellectual pursuits, strategy, and refinement, often looked down on the golem kingdom's practical, grounded nature and their reliance on brute strength. The golem kingdom, in turn, viewed the mortals as arrogant and overly ambitious, more concerned with ideals than the realities of survival. This fragile relationship had nearly broken several times, particularly as both kingdoms faced incursions from the demon king's forces. Each kingdom feared that the other might seize the opportunity to invade or, worse, align with the demonic kingdom in exchange for protection. When word of the demon king's rising power spread, both kingdoms realized they needed to fortify their alliance against the threat. An arranged marriage between Prince Aric of the Mortal Kingdom and Princess Thyra of the Golem Kingdom was seen as the most effective way to bind their fates together. Princess Thyra, a pillar of strength and grace, was beloved by her people. She embodied the unyielding spirit of the Golem Kingdom, both strong and unbreakable. She was known not only for her physical prowess but for her wisdom and patience, qualities that her father, the Golem King, held in the highest regard. Her people trusted her judgment and admired her resilience. Though the idea of marrying a mortal prince, especially one with a reputation for arrogance, unsettled her, Thyra accepted her duty. She saw the alliance as an opportunity to ensure her people's safety and stability. Besides, she had heard tales of Prince Aric's bravery and strength, and part of her was curious about this mortal warrior. Aric, on the other hand, had reservations of his own. He had little interest in a marriage alliance. He believed he could forge alliances on his terms, through power and respect rather than a wedding vow. To him, Thyra was a symbol of diplomacy rather than a person. However, upon meeting her, he was struck by her quiet strength. Thyra's presence had a grounding effect. She did not look at him with the fawning admiration he was accustomed to but with a steady gaze that seemed to pierce through his confidence to something deeper within him. Her steady nature, her lack of flattery, and the way she met his intensity with calmness intrigued him. For the first time, he saw a partner who wasn't intimidated by him, someone who met his arrogance with strength rather than submission. The two were married in a grand ceremony, an event that brought mortals and golems together in uneasy celebration. To the court and the people of both kingdoms, their union was a symbol of peace and cooperation. Behind closed doors, however, Aric and Thyra faced the challenges of their differences. Thyra often advised Aric to take a more measured approach, to consider the long-term consequences of his actions. But Aric, ever impatient and eager to prove himself, often dismissed her words, certain he knew best. Their disagreements were frequent and heated, Yet Thyra never faltered in her commitment to him. What kept them together, despite Aric's arrogance, was something deeper than a shared purpose. Thyra saw through his pride to the fierce loyalty and protectiveness he held for those he cared about. She could see that beneath his bravado lay a man who felt the weight of his destiny, who carried his responsibility with both fear and determination. She admired his courage and his willingness to face the Demon King, a task no other had the strength or will to undertake. For all his faults, she saw the heart of a warrior, someone willing to sacrifice anything to protect his kingdom. In rare, unguarded moments, Aric would reveal glimpses of his vulnerability to her, and it was then that Thyra saw the depth of his love and dedication, not just to his destiny but to her. Aric, too, came to love Thyra in his own way. While he did not always heed her advice, he respected her unwavering loyalty and resilience. She was unshakable, a steady force that he knew he could depend on even when the world seemed uncertain. Her calm presence reminded him that he didn't have to shoulder his burdens alone, even if his pride often kept him from admitting it. Aric found that, unlike others who were quick to flatter him, Thyra's counsel came from a place of genuine care, not fear or ambition. She spoke to him as an equal, and he valued that honesty, even if he did not always show it. In time, their relationship grew beyond duty and politics. Though they argued, each clash revealed a deeper understanding between them. Thyra's patience began to temper Aric's impulsiveness, while his passion and drive sparked a new fire in her. She learned to see beyond his arrogance, understanding that his pride was both his strength and his greatest vulnerability. And Aric, though often dismissive of her advice, came to cherish her as a steadying presence, someone he could count on when others wavered. Their marriage, though born of necessity, became a bond that ran deeper than either could have anticipated. Thyra's love for Aric softened the edges of his pride, while his fierce devotion inspired her to trust him even when she disagreed with his choices. Together, they formed a partnership that was both passionate and enduring, a testament to the strength that could be found in unity, even between two seemingly opposite souls. To the courts of both kingdoms, their union symbolized hope. To Aric and Thyra, it became a source of unexpected happiness, a bond forged not just by duty but by love that grew through struggle, resilience, and respect. And though their path was often difficult, neither could imagine walking it without the other. Part 3. The Conspiracy. In the mortal kingdom, Prince Aric was a figure both feared and admired. His skills with a blade and mastery of battle tactics were unmatched among his peers, and he carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His actions often showed he cared little for the traditions of the court or the wisdom of his advisors. As the chosen one, he believed his destiny gave him the right to do as he pleased. This unyielding attitude unsettled many in the mortal king's court, who wondered if the prince's impulsive nature was more a curse than a blessing. Whispers began to circulate among the court's highest-ranking members. Many had seen Aric's reckless disregard for protocol, his unwillingness to accept counsel, and his quick temper when challenged. He dismissed older, wiser advisors, favoring his own instincts, and saw any attempt to guide him as an affront to his authority. "I am the chosen one," he would remind them, "foretold to save this world. Who are any of you to question me?" The prince's arrogance ran even deeper in his marriage to Princess Thyra of the Golem Kingdom. Their union was one of strategy, but Aric showed little regard for her wisdom or strength, treating her more as an emblem of his power rather than a true partner. Though Thyra was known for her resilience and deep insight, he dismissed her counsel as too cautious, often mocking her grounded nature. This behavior left Thyra feeling alienated, and court members took notice. Rumors soon began circulating that perhaps Aric's arrogance was a sign of something darker within him. Though the prophecy claimed the chosen one would have a divine soul, his behavior hardly reflected divinity. Some wondered if he had been touched by demonic influence instead, an ironic twist for one meant to destroy the Demon King. As time went on, the suspicion grew. Perhaps Aric wasn't the prophesied savior after all. Perhaps he was being groomed by darker forces, led astray by the very ambition he so openly displayed. One night, at a grand feast, Aric's impatience reached a dangerous peak. An advisor, an elderly man named Lord Galen, dared to question his preparation for battle against the Demon King, suggesting the prince needed to learn discipline. Aric rose from his seat, his face a mask of fury. "You dare challenge my destiny?" he snarled, gripping his goblet tightly. "I am the future of this kingdom. I will rid the world of the Demon King, and I will rule with the strength none of you possess." The court fell silent, horrified. His words, once inspiring, now sounded dangerously unhinged, full of ego rather than purpose. The mortal king, shaken by his son's outburst, struggled to maintain composure. It was then that a group of conspirators, members of the king's inner circle, decided they could no longer wait and watch Aric's dark side grow unchecked. If this was their future king, he would lead them to ruin rather than salvation. Perhaps he was not destined to be a hero, but a tyrant even worse than the Demon King himself. The conspirators hatched a plan. They would convince the king that Aric, though a warrior, lacked the wisdom and restraint to rule. Worse, they would argue that his growing arrogance and disregard for counsel marked him as unworthy of the title of Chosen One. They whispered that perhaps the prophecy was misread, or that Aric's soul might actually bear the taint of demonic influence. His unbridled ambition, they suggested, might make him the Demon King's perfect successor rather than his destroyer. In their scheme, they wove a story of treachery, claiming that Aric had plotted to seize the throne with the help of the Golem Kingdom. They spread false tales that he intended to use his marriage to Princess Thyra as a bridge to expand his rule across all 5 kingdoms, starting with his own. Though the king resisted these claims at first, doubt began to fester. How could a soul destined for divinity behave with such cruelty, pride, and impatience? Eventually, enough pressure was placed on the king that he agreed to the conspirators' drastic measure. Aric and Thyra were accused of treason, stripped of their titles, and banished to the demonic kingdom. As guards led Aric away in chains, he raged and shouted, his face twisted in betrayal. To the court, this rage looked more like the face of a monster than of a savior. As Aric and Thyra were sent into exile, the mortal kingdom's court watched with heavy hearts. They had planted the seeds of his downfall to protect their realm, yet they were haunted by uncertainty. Had they acted wisely, or had they sent their only hope into the hands of the Demon King? In truth, they hoped that this exile would be a trial that would either break him or teach him the humility he sorely needed. Only time would tell if he was truly the Chosen One, or just another soul lost to darkness. Part 4. Thyra's Hidden Power. Exiled to the harsh, shadowed lands of the demonic kingdom, Prince Aric and Princess Thyra found themselves abandoned by their people, with nothing but each other in a land filled with darkness. The air was thick with the scent of ash, and the skies were a constant murky gray. The couple had only days to acclimate to their new reality when their fate took a darker turn. The Demon King, an ancient and malevolent force who had ruled his kingdom for centuries, had been watching them since they crossed his borders. He was not only aware of their presence but knew precisely why they had been exiled. Aric's supposed arrogance, his fiery pride, and the mortal kingdom's mistrust of their own prophesied savior. But it was not Prince Aric who interested the Demon King most. It was Princess Thyra. Thyra possessed a strength both physical and spiritual that the Demon King saw as unique, even within the Golem lineage. Golems were known for their physical endurance, but Thyra's spirit was especially unbreakable, tempered by years of patience and the steadfast duty she felt toward her people. This inner fortitude was, to the Demon King, a powerful reservoir of energy that could be twisted and repurposed to fuel his dark magic. His spells required an enduring spirit to sustain them, something that his demonic subjects lacked, for their loyalty was born of fear, not resilience. Thyra's soul would feed his powers in a way no demons ever could. The Demon King had first heard of her strength through rumors and spies, but he'd confirmed it through ancient spells that let him perceive the soul's aura. When he cast his sight upon her, he was astonished by the unwavering glow that emanated from her spirit. He saw that with her bound to his will, his powers could expand beyond the demonic kingdom, allowing him to corrupt the realms he'd longed to conquer. The Demon King devised a plan to take her without risking a confrontation with Aric, whose prophesied destiny unnerved even him. He knew Aric's weaknesses, His arrogance and impulsiveness made him easy to provoke. The Demon King sent his trusted agents to spread rumors among the creatures of the demonic kingdom that he would soon make a move against Aric. Word reached Aric quickly, warning him that the Demon King would attack him directly. Aric, eager to prove himself after his humiliating exile, fell into the trap. Determined to confront the Demon King head-on, Aric left Thyra in a hidden shelter, promising he would return. He ventured deep into the wastelands, looking for signs of the Demon King. It was then, in the dead of night, that the Demon King's forces moved in, finding Thyra alone. She fought valiantly, but outnumbered and outmatched, she was eventually subdued and taken to the Demon King's fortress. When Aric returned to their shelter to find it empty, the shock of her absence hit him like a blade. At first, his reaction was a storm of fury and frustration. He paced, shouting into the night, railing against the Demon King, the mortal kingdom, even himself. He could scarcely contain the rage that surged within him, consuming him in a spiral of self-blame and regret. His heart ached with the knowledge that he'd been so easily tricked, that his pride had left her vulnerable. The thought that he had failed Thyra, that his own impatience had cost him the person he loved most, haunted him, gnawing at his soul. For days, he wandered the barren lands alone, lost in anger. His every thought was consumed by visions of vengeance. Yet, as his rage began to burn itself out, it gave way to something deeper, a painful clarity. In the midst of his despair, he remembered her steady gaze, the way she'd always met his fury with calm resolve. Thyra had always believed in him, even when others doubted him. She had accepted his faults and stood by him, even in exile. A new feeling began to replace his anger, a fierce, unyielding sense of purpose. He knew now that his fury alone would not bring her back. For the first time, he recognized that this journey was not about proving his strength or validating his pride. It was about saving Thyra, about protecting the one person who had given him hope and understanding when all others had cast him aside. His love for her became his guiding force, a flame of purpose that would not be extinguished. He began his journey toward the Demon King's fortress with a renewed sense of purpose, carrying with him not only the weight of his destiny, but also the conviction that he could not afford to fail her again. Every step he took was driven by his love for Thyra, a love that now burned brighter than his own ego. For the first time, Aric felt humbled by the enormity of what he faced, and in that humility, he found strength he hadn't known he possessed. As he prepared to face the Demon King, Aric was no longer motivated by rage or the need to prove himself. His mission was clear. He would rescue Thyra, not for glory or power, but out of love and devotion. With her memory steadying him, he set forth, vowing that he would return with her, no matter the cost. And in that moment, Aric transformed, stepping into the role of the true chosen one, not out of pride, but out of love and purpose. Part 5. Monkey Business. In the dark, twisted wilderness of the demonic kingdom, Prince Aric trudged onward, driven by his love for Thyra and the fierce purpose that had replaced his fury. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, filled with shadowy creatures and thorned plants that seemed to reach for him as he passed. Days into his journey, exhausted and on the brink of collapse, he stumbled upon an unexpected figure sitting atop a rocky outcrop, laughing as though at some cosmic joke. It was the Monkey King, a legendary figure of the Beast Kingdom. Though he looked unassuming at first, small, wiry, with a mischievous gleam in his eye, his presence exuded an ancient and undeniable power. The Monkey King was known for his agility, his unmatched strength, and his command over the natural forces that he could bend to his will. He could shape-shift, vanish at will, and summon storms to shield himself. His fur shimmered with an ethereal light, and he wore an elaborate golden circlet, a symbol of his status among the beasts. His most incredible power, however, was his vision of the spirit, which allowed him to see the true essence of any being's soul. The Monkey King was in the demonic kingdom on his own quest. He'd sensed the dark magic gathering and knew it threatened the balance of all realms. He sought to understand the Demon King's intentions, but also harbored a personal curiosity for the mortal world and its struggles. When he saw Aric, weary yet resolute, wandering through the wasteland, he was intrigued. Approaching Aric with a smirk, the Monkey King watched as the prince instinctively raised his sword. But before Aric could attack, the Monkey King leaped into the air, flipping gracefully to land behind him. "Your soul," the Monkey King said with a curious grin. "It shines brightly, chosen one. A divine glow, yet bound in shadow." Aric turned, startled. No one had ever spoken to him with such familiarity, as though his arrogance, his title, and his burdens were all meaningless to this stranger. The Monkey King peered closely at him, unaffected by Aric's attempt at an imposing glare. Aric saw no fear or deference in the creature's gaze, only playful curiosity and wisdom. It was as if the Monkey King could see past all of his pride, anger, and doubt to the depths of his heart. The Monkey King studied Aric for a moment longer, then let out a low whistle. "If you march straight into the Demon King's lair like this, you'll lose before you even begin. That sword of yours may cut flesh, but it will do nothing against the Demon King's magic." Aric bristled. "I've come this far on my own, and I will defeat the Demon King on my own." The Monkey King let out a laugh, unbothered by Aric's defensiveness. "Pride is a heavy weapon to wield," he said with a smirk. "Heavier than your sword, if I'd wager." Something about the Monkey King's confidence made Aric pause. He had rarely taken advice, least of all from strangers, but this strange creature radiated an air of experience and strength beyond anything Aric had encountered. Beneath the Monkey King's playfulness, Aric sensed a depth of wisdom he couldn't ignore. Here, in this barren wasteland, stripped of his court and titles, Aric realized he was alone and outmatched. Reluctantly, he lowered his sword. "If you truly know how to help me defeat the Demon King," Aric muttered, "then I'll listen." "Listen is a good start," the Monkey King said, chuckling. "But humility? That's what you'll need to learn." Over the following days, the Monkey King led Aric through a series of grueling challenges. His training methods were unorthodox and often exasperating. Aric was forced to carry heavy stones through the jagged terrain, to meditate in silence for hours, and to move with agility and restraint rather than brute strength. It was frustrating. Aric had always relied on his power and his swiftness, but the Monkey King's training was different. He pushed Aric to think, to observe, to anticipate rather than react. When Aric made mistakes or lost patience, the Monkey King merely smirked and left him to figure things out on his own. Through the Monkey King's vision of the spirit, he could see that Aric's soul was plagued by the darkness of arrogance and impatience. To overcome this, the Monkey King set trials that forced Aric to work in unity with nature, to understand how to draw strength from his surroundings rather than dominating them. One day, he instructed Aric to walk across a field of poisonous vines without harming them, using only his senses and agility to pass unharmed. Another day, he tasked Aric with summoning his energy to break stone by touching it gently, showing him how to harness power without force. The Monkey King also taught him the value of waiting, a lesson Aric struggled with the most. Each time he failed to follow instructions, the Monkey King would merely laugh and say, "Patience is the sharpest sword you'll ever wield, young prince." Though it was painful for Aric to admit, he began to see the truth in those words. He'd always acted rashly, driven by his pride, but he began to understand that true strength came not from arrogance but from discipline. As his training progressed, Aric found his initial reluctance fading. He no longer saw the Monkey King as a strange creature, but as a guide who possessed a knowledge of the world that Aric had never considered. The Monkey King's strength was not in his power alone, but in his understanding of balance. Aric began to respect him deeply, even when he was made to do tasks that seemed trivial. Gradually, Aric found himself feeling lighter, as if he'd shed a weight he hadn't known he carried. Aric's soul grew clearer, brighter, shedding the shadows that had once darkened it. The divine glow within him, once clouded by anger and ego, now shone brightly, visible to the Monkey King as a beacon of newfound purpose. For the first time, Aric understood the value of humility, patience, and unity. As their training came to an end, the Monkey King gifted Aric a blessing, a shard of his own power, to call upon in times of need. "I cannot fight the Demon King for you," he said, "but I have given you what you need to defeat him. Remember what you've learned here. If you forget these lessons, you'll fail. But if you let go of pride and remember the strength that lies in humility, patience, and unity, you'll find that you're unstoppable." With a final mischievous grin, the Monkey King bowed, and in a flash, vanished into the shadows. Aric, standing alone in the wilderness, felt stronger and more centered than he ever had before. He was no longer driven by anger or pride, but by purpose and love. And as he set out to continue his quest, he knew that, with the Monkey King's teachings, he was finally ready to face the Demon King, not as a brash warrior, but as a true chosen one. Part 6. An Extension of the Soul. After his training with the Monkey King, Prince Aric wandered the bleak, shifting landscape of the demonic kingdom, his heart steady and focused. The terrain grew more treacherous as he ventured closer to the Demon King's fortress, the air thick with a malevolent energy that felt alive, pressing against him with every step. But he carried with him the lessons of patience, humility, and unity. He walked carefully, attuned to the rhythm of his surroundings, remembering the Monkey King's teachings to stay grounded and aware of each step. It was then, amid the shadows and twisted rock formations, that he stumbled upon something unusual. In a narrow gorge hidden by jagged cliffs, he noticed a faint glow, a silvery light that seemed out of place in the dark, cursed landscape. Drawn to it, Aric approached carefully, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. As he stepped closer, the glow intensified, illuminating a small alcove carved into the cliffside. There, he saw it, an elegant, gleaming bow suspended in midair, as though held up by an invisible force. Its form was delicate yet powerful, crafted from silver that shimmered with a celestial glow. Golden engravings wound around it, forming intricate designs that seemed to shift and move. The divine bow radiated an aura of strength and tranquility, filling the air with an otherworldly hum. Aric knew instantly that this was no ordinary weapon. It was the divine bow, a legendary artifact that had been spoken of in ancient prophecies, the very weapon he needed to defeat the Demon King. The celestial kingdom, guardians of the divine relics, had long hidden the divine bow as a test. They had known the chosen one would one day come, but they also knew that only one who was truly worthy could wield it. The bow's power was immense, capable of channeling pure divine energy, piercing through any evil and breaking curses. But if it fell into the wrong hands, it would become a tool of destruction, amplifying the darkness in one's heart rather than the light. The Celestials had chosen to hide the bow here, deep in the heart of the demonic kingdom, as the ultimate test for Prince Aric. They understood that the demonic kingdom's influence would expose and amplify his flaws if he was not ready. Aric's journey through this dark land, and the trials he would face, would serve as a purification. Only a heart strengthened by humility and purpose could withstand the bow's power without succumbing to corruption. If someone unworthy claimed the bow, it would twist to their darker impulses, amplifying their pride, anger, or greed. The Celestials had placed wards around it so that any who attempted to take it with impure motives would find themselves cursed, their souls bound to the demonic kingdom forever, slaves to its darkness. Only one who had conquered his own inner darkness would be able to lift it unscathed. Aric reached out hesitantly, feeling the bow's energy resonating with his own. But as he moved his hand closer, he felt a strange resistance, a subtle push, as though the bow itself were testing him. He remembered the lessons the Monkey King had drilled into him, not to take power by force, but to approach it with respect, patience, and purpose. He paused, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Slowly, he extended his hand again, his heart calm, his intentions clear. This time, the resistance softened, and the bow allowed itself to be taken, its energy merging with his own. As his fingers closed around it, a surge of divine energy coursed through him, filling him with light. The divine bow accepted him as its rightful wielder. Aric felt a deep sense of reverence and responsibility as he held the bow, a stark contrast to the pride and entitlement he had once carried. The training he'd endured with the Monkey King had taught him more than how to wield his strength. It had reshaped his very soul, enabling him to connect with the divine Tao in a way that was both powerful and humbling. The lessons of patience allowed him to feel the rhythm of the Tao's energy, while humility allowed him to wield it without overestimating his control over it. And it was unity that allowed him to draw from the Tao's power harmoniously, as though it were an extension of himself rather than a weapon to be wielded. With the Tao now in his hands, Aric felt a new sense of purpose. The journey ahead was still perilous, but he was no longer alone. He carried with him the strength of the divine Tao and the teachings that had prepared him to use it. His resolve was unwavering, his heart clear, and his soul ready for the final battle. With the divine Tao strapped across his back, Aric set off toward the Demon King's fortress, each step lighter than the last. The darkness no longer felt oppressive, but merely another obstacle he was prepared to face. And for the first time, he felt truly worthy of his destiny, ready to fulfill the prophecy, not out of pride or ambition, but out of love and the deep sense of duty he now carried within. Part 7. The Final Battle. When Prince Aric finally arrived at the Demon King's fortress, a towering stronghold carved from the blackened stone of the demonic kingdom, he was struck by a sight that filled him with dread. A dark miasma pulsed from the fortress, spreading out like ink in water, tainting the lands around it. The sky had darkened further, swirling with ominous clouds as bolts of crimson lightning cracked through the air. Aric realized with a sinking heart that the Demon King had already begun to tap into Princess Thyra's power, using her unbreakable spirit as a conduit to expand his influence over the other kingdoms. It was clear that, if left unchecked, the Demon King's corruption would soon spread into the mortal, golem, beast, and celestial kingdoms, bringing them all under his dark rule. Fearing what he would find inside, Aric steeled himself and entered the fortress, his heart beating with a blend of anger and desperation. He had to save Thyra before the Demon King's corruption consumed her entirely, transforming her spirit into a reservoir of darkness. As he made his way through the fortress, Aric encountered twisted creatures, souls corrupted by the Demon King's magic, that lurched toward him, their eyes vacant yet filled with rage. Channeling his training with the Monkey King, Aric moved with agility and instinct, evading attacks and slipping past them, navigating the fortress's treacherous halls until he reached the inner sanctum. There, on a throne carved from obsidian, sat the Demon King, his form wreathed in dark energy, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Princess Thyra lay chained beside him, her once strong frame weakened but her spirit unbroken. As their eyes met, Aric felt his purpose solidify. He would save her no matter the cost. The Demon King rose, his voice like thunder. "You think you can stop me, mortal prince?" he sneered, and with a wave of his hand, darkness surged through the room, obscuring him from view. Aric raised the divine bow, ready to strike, but the Demon King was faster. Shadows swept over Aric, and in a heartbeat, the Demon King wrenched the bow from his hands, casting it aside where it vanished into the darkness. Aric's weapon, his only means to defeat the Demon King, was gone. The Demon King laughed, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Without your divine weapon, you are nothing. I will leave you to watch as I corrupt every last kingdom with her power." Aric felt a flash of despair as he realized he was alone, without the one weapon that could kill his enemy. But then he remembered his training with the Monkey King. Power was not only in weapons but within himself. Determined not to give in, Aric closed his eyes, focusing on the energy within his soul. He could feel the warmth, the light that had grown brighter through his journey, through his love for Thyra and the purpose he'd found along the way. Drawing upon this inner strength, he summoned the shard of the Monkey King's power, which flickered to life within him. He opened his eyes, which now glowed faintly with the same ethereal light, and the darkness surrounding him seemed to weaken. The Demon King's laughter faded as he sensed the shift. Enraged, he lunged at Aric, but Aric was ready. Moving with the agility and instincts he'd honed with the Monkey King, he dodged the Demon King's strikes, evading each blow with grace. Every time the Demon King tried to corner him, Aric slipped through the shadows, unpredictable and swift. He used his agility to keep the Demon King at bay, turning the fortress into a maze of misdirection, forcing the demon king to grow more desperate and reckless in his attempts to pin him down. But evading alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to strike. Summoning the energy of his soul, Aric approached the obsidian walls around him. With a gentle touch, he channeled his power, shattering sections of stone, creating openings and pathways that he could use to his advantage. The destruction served as both a means to trap the demon king and a display of his inner strength, breaking the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. Each shattered wall weakened the fortress, and with it, the influence of the demonic pacts that gave the demon king his invulnerability. The demonic pacts that had evaded the visions of the gods for all this time had been hidden within the very walls of the demon king's fortress with mystical mirages. The demon king, sensing his power diminishing, tried to flee, but Aric was relentless. With every shattered wall and broken stone, the demonic pacts weakened further, loosening their grip on the fortress. Aric realized that the demon king's strength was tied to the fortress itself, to the ancient pacts that bound him to this dark place. He didn't need the divine bow to defeat the demon king directly. He needed only to destroy the foundation of his power. With one final surge of energy, Aric called upon the shard of the monkey king's power, amplifying his own. He struck the ground, sending a wave of energy rippling through the fortress. Cracks spread like veins across the walls, the ceiling, and the throne itself. The demonic magic that held the fortress together began to unravel, and with it, the pacts that made the demon king invulnerable. The demon king, now frantic, lunged at Aric, but his form flickered, his strength failing. Aric met his gaze, unwavering, his soul shining with a light that cut through the darkness. "Your power was built on shadows and lies," Aric said, his voice steady. "You are nothing without them." As the fortress collapsed around them, Aric closed the distance between himself and the demon king. Channeling the last of his strength, he placed a hand on the demon king's chest, a touch as gentle as a whisper, yet charged with the power he had learned to wield with precision. With this final act, he shattered the last remnants of the demon king's essence, dispelling his form into nothingness. The darkness lifted, the shadows dissipating as the fortress crumbled. Aric rushed to Thyra, freeing her from her chains. She looked at him, weary but smiling, her eyes filled with pride and gratitude. Together, they escaped as the last remnants of the fortress collapsed behind them, the demonic pacts broken, the corruption fading from the land. Standing together in the wasteland, Aric felt the weight of his journey settle upon him. He had defeated the demon king not through pride or brute force, but by relying on the strength of his soul, the humility he had gained, and the unity he had embraced. Thyra took his hand, and in that moment, he knew he had become more than a warrior. He had become the true chosen one, guided by love, humility, and purpose. The demon king was gone, his power shattered and his ambitions dissolved. And as Aric and Thyra looked out over the horizon, they knew that the darkness would not return. They had won not just for themselves, but for all the kingdoms, and for the hope of peace that would follow. Part 8. The New Kingdom. As dawn broke over the wasteland of the demonic kingdom, Prince Aric and Princess Thyra rested on a cliff overlooking the crumbling ruins of the demon king's fortress. The darkness that had once tainted the land was lifting, leaving behind a quiet stillness. Aric held Thyra close, his heart full, but his thoughts drifted to the prophecy that had led him here. The prophecy had foretold that the Chosen One would wield a divine weapon to defeat the demon king, yet Aric had not used the divine bow. Instead, he had drawn upon his soul, the strength he had gained through his journey, and the wisdom of the Monkey King's teachings. For the first time, Aric questioned whether the prophecy had been literal or merely a vision woven from ancient hopes. Perhaps the divine weapon the ancients foresaw was not any physical object, but the strength he had found within himself. In a way, the prophecy had been true, just not in the way he had once imagined. He realized that prophecies might not always tell the exact future. Rather, they could inspire those meant to fulfill them to find their own path. And perhaps that was why he, among all others, had been blessed with a divine soul, not because he was meant to wield a weapon of the gods, but because he had the capacity to transform, to grow, and to embody the divine strength required to face darkness. Thyra looked at him with awe as he explained the revelation. In his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen before, a calm, centered wisdom, free from the arrogance that had once clouded his soul. She smiled, a warmth spreading through her heart, knowing he was no longer driven by pride or anger but by love, humility, and purpose. "You've become someone worthy of this journey, Aric," she whispered, holding his hand tightly. She had always loved him, even when he was brash and impatient, but now she felt a deeper love, born of respect and admiration for the man he had become. That night, they celebrated their reunion under the stars. There were no lavish halls or feasts, only the quiet of the wilderness, the warmth of a small fire, and each other. They spoke of their hopes, their dreams, and their plans for a future without the shadow of the Demon King. They laughed, reminiscing about how much had changed since their marriage was first arranged. Together, they shared the quiet joy of being reunited, free from the burdens that had once divided them. But Aric knew that their journey was not yet over. They could not remain in the demonic kingdom, nor could they return to the mortal kingdom without proving their worth. They had been exiled, accused of treachery, and now faced the daunting task of reclaiming their place. Just as doubt crept into Aric's heart, a familiar figure appeared out of the shadows, the Monkey King, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Back so soon?" the Monkey King teased, his grin wide. "I knew you'd defeat the Demon King, but I didn't think you'd forget the small matter of proving yourselves to your kingdom." Aric and Thyra shared a glance. They hadn't forgotten. They simply hadn't known how to begin. The Monkey King, however, had a plan. He suggested that they gather the leaders of each kingdom, the mortal, golem, beast, and celestial, and tell them the full story. The Monkey King promised to vouch for Aric and Thyra, knowing that the weight of his own reputation as a respected figure in the Beast Kingdom would lend credence to their tale. When they arrived in the mortal kingdom, they were met with cautious stares and whispered doubts. But with the Monkey King by their side, and Aric's tale of humility and transformation, the council listened. Thyra spoke passionately of Aric's growth, of the strength and wisdom he had gained, and of his sacrifice to protect all kingdoms. The Monkey King added his own words, painting a vivid picture of Aric's journey and his eventual triumph. One by one, the leaders of each kingdom softened, moved by the story of redemption and unity. At last, the mortal king himself stood and welcomed Aric and Thyra back into the kingdom, recognizing not only Aric's role as the chosen one, but also his personal growth. They had earned the right to return, not by divine prophecy alone, but by proving their loyalty, courage, and wisdom. With the Demon King gone, the darkness that had plagued the demonic kingdom lifted, restoring its lands and its people to a state of quiet balance. The ancient pacts that had bound the Demon King dissolved, and the demonic creatures who had been forced to serve him were freed. Some returned to their lands, while others sought peace in the quiet shadows, no longer bound to darkness. The leaders of all kingdoms recognized the immense significance of Aric's journey. His story wasn't just one of victory over evil. It was a testament to the power of transformation, humility, and unity among the kingdoms. They declared that each year, a grand celebration would be held in his honor, reminding all kingdoms of the triumph of courage and the strength found in unity. It was a celebration of the potential within every person to grow, to change, and to bring light even to the darkest places. As Aric and Thyra returned to the mortal kingdom, they found themselves embraced by people who had once doubted them. Standing once more in the halls of his father's court, Aric reflected on his journey. He was no longer the arrogant prince who had scorned advice and acted only for himself. The trials he had faced had transformed him into a leader worthy of respect, one who would lead not by power alone, but with wisdom, patience, and compassion. Looking out over the kingdom he would one day rule, Aric felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had not only saved his soul, but had shown him the importance of humility, unity, and the bonds of love. And with Thyra by his side, he knew they would lead not as distant rulers but as guides, keeping alive the lessons of their journey and passing them on to future generations. Each year, when the kingdoms gathered to celebrate, Aric would join them, reflecting on how far he had come. And as he looked into the eyes of those he had once seen as rivals, he found himself grateful for the hardships that had brought him to this moment. His story, once merely a prophecy, had become a legacy, a reminder that true strength lay not in weapons or titles, but in the power of a heart that had learned to love, to grow, and to overcome.